Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And thank you for joining us today. The next 2 hours are devoted to learning something more, not just about the world of shoes and ships and sealing wax, but about how, what, and why we believe as we do. A time for the open-minded, willing to challenge some of those old ideas behind what we think we know, who we are, and who we might become. Enlightenment is a term traditionally used to describe a period in Western philosophy and cultural life, centered upon the 18th century, in which reason was advocated as the primary source of legitimacy for authority. We acknowledge this usage, but we seek to enlarge upon it, adding the idea of experiencing the quintessential truth about ourselves, ever seeking the possibility of an epistemological certainty, that level of knowing from within who we really are, why we are here, and what we do with the lives we live. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. We have a special chat room with some very special folks that join us every week, so don't miss out. Okay, Rav, tell us all about what makes your chat room so special.
Oh, we have the best chat room ever. We have a great group of people. It brings an added dimension to your current interview. We have questions going on, lots of bits of advice.
All right. Now, every week I read some of your letters as our way of paying respect to the very important role you play in making this show successful. But before we get to that, I have invited Suze Casey to join today in order to express my gratitude to her. Suze had this 11 o'clock time slot, I should say, 11 to noon, for her show, Flipping the Switch. And she graciously agreed to move her show in order to make available a 2-hour slot for Provocative Enlightenment. So, welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Suze, and once again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Eldon, it's my absolute pleasure to support you and your work on CTR Network. I know that listeners are going to find it as fascinating as I do.
Well, thank you. Tell us, what is your new time slot?
I've moved to Thursdays, and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific, so that's 3 p.m. Mountain Time and 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you're in any other time zone, you have to do your own math. I can manage it that far.
Thursday at 2 Pacific, though.
Thursday at 2 Pacific, Flipping the Switch with Suze, and I'm moving the show will stay the same, lots of callers, and we'll do repatterning on air and support people moving through some old belief systems so that they can come to a new place of awareness and enlightenment.
Okay, well, I'm sure that some of your listeners are listening now, and many of the people that we have brought here to CTR are familiar with your show, but for all of us, just in case, tell us about your show, Flipping the Switch. What is the aim, the objective? Why are you doing it, Suze?
Thanks for asking, Eldon. It's based in the technique that I developed called belief repatterning. And my background is as an educator. I have a master's degree in education, and I decided about 35 years ago that it had to be a whole lot easier than it was. And so about 25 years ago, I quit banging my head against the wall and went, okay, if it has to be easier, then why don't I make it so? And so I began to apply educational learning theory to working my way through challenges and realized that, the things that I was experiencing in my life were simply reflections of the beliefs that I held, and that if I could shift those beliefs easily and with grace and with some fun, that I could just keep moving and growing and learning. And I watched little kids and watched how we kind of put things together and developed a really quite simple technique. It's a bit like chess, simple to learn and a little bit longer to master it. But it's something that rubber hits the road and is very pragmatic. And I just love watching people move through those places where they've been stuck into a new reality, and so they can create what they truly desire and deserve.
Well, now, it sounds like you and I do quite a bit of collateral work. I mean, The Power of Belief, that indeed one of my books is titled, I Believe When Believing in Yourself Matters. So I happen to have your book. I've ordered it, and you and I have talked about you being a guest on this show. I think we're pretty well booked until into the first of the year. But are you willing to join me as a guest as soon as we can schedule you in, Suze?
I would be absolutely thrilled to join with you, Eldon, and just, take a look at, because I'm fascinated by the work that you do as well. You come at it from a much more scientific, and I come at it from a much more soft and personal, and where we meet in the middle, I think, is awesome. And I'm excited to explore that with you and to have your listeners and my listeners in on the conversation, because I think it'll be an incredible one.
So am I. I'm really excited about that. Okay, one last thing, Suze. Do you have anything else that you would like to leave our listening audience with today?
I would just like to encourage everyone to have a really good listen to Eldon and the people that he brings on, because he has his finger on the pulse of some very, very interesting new thought, and it will be provocative and different kind of show than what I do. But wow, you're going to have some great information and some things to be thinking about and moving you forward in other really interesting ways. And I'm really excited that my colleague Eldon from Hay House, because we're both published with Hay House. My book, Belief Repatterning: An Amazing Technique for Flipping the Switch, and his several books on Hay House. And to have both of us over here on CTR, I think we can, really enjoy having some cross-referencing of people. They're going to learn some things from both sides, and I'm excited about that opportunity.
Well, again, Suze, I want to thank you for making this opportunity available for us, and I'm excited about working more with you. And I want to encourage everybody that's listening to tune in to Flipping the Switch on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific. And as Suze said, if you live somewhere besides Pacific, I'll let you do the time arrangement. Thanks for joining us, Suze.
Take care.
You have a great one now.
You
bye-bye.
as well. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, now to your letters. Hannah wrote, I enjoy listening to you. I admire your honesty. I love when people speak straight. I am the same way. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Cyril wrote, heard you on Coast to Coast with George Noory, and I must say I was very impressed with your interview, examples, and work. Carl wrote, when I heard you with George Noory, I was impressed with your observation that only by increasing consciousness will we be able to confront and deal with the pressing realities facing us today. Ingrid wrote, thank you, Dr. Taylor, for being you and sharing your findings and treasures with us. And John wrote, I love how you do radio. Well, thank you, John. I do love doing it. Okay, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by sending your email to eldon@eldontaylor.com or by joining me on Facebook. We can't get all of your letters on the air, but they do impact our programming, and once again, I both appreciate and thank you for your feedback and continued support. If you're new to this show, you may enjoy our archives. You can find over 5 years of archives at provocativeenlightenment.com. During the past 5 years, we've interviewed Hollywood greats, politicians, psychics, former CIA personnel, hard scientists, skeptics, philosophers, social psychologists, best-selling authors, and you name it, including a few channels and mediums. We have charted the waters of parapsychology, psychic phenomena, UFOs, NDEs, physics, psychology, brainwashing, and much more. If any of that sounds like your kind of radio, be sure and check out our archives, again at provocativeenlightenment.com. Now to today's show. On the Edge of Reality with Colin Andrews and his lovely wife, Dr. Synthia Andrews. Many of you have sent letters asking about such things as chemtrails, crop circles, orbs, and secret technology. Well, here's your show. For all of that and more is the subject of the new book, On the Edge of Reality. So let me tell you a little about our guest. Colin Andrews is a veteran researcher of unusual phenomena. Since 1983, he has supplied the public and British government with pioneering research. Colin is known around the world for his groundbreaking work with crop circles, a term he coined, UFO and Consciousness Research. He has recently attracted international attention with his discovery of the radar anomalies in Australia, subsequently confounding the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, and we're going to get into that today. He is the co-author of 2 best-selling books and the author of 4 alternative science classics. His website is www.colinandrews.net, where he receives up to 23,000 visitors a day. Now, that's a lot of traffic, but I've been to the site, I've checked it out, and I can tell you, I understand why there are that many visitors. Colin has appeared in over 100 television documentaries, including productions by National Geographic, Discovery, and History's Mysteries. He is currently featured in 2 documentaries to be released in 2012 by National Geographic and Norwegian television. He has been featured on 60 Minutes, 2020 with Barbara Walters, Good Morning America, Sightings, Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, Coast to Coast, The Shirley MacLaine Show, Dan Aykroyd's Out There, The Sally Jesse Raphael Show, BBC's Daytime Live, and the list goes on. I'm just going to stop. Now, Dr. Synthia Andrews has been in the world of holistic health for over 25 years. Her work is focused on the resolution and relief of pain and its underlying mechanical, metabolic, emotional, or traumatic causes. She has recently expanded her scope of practice to include naturopathic medicine in order to assist people even further in their quest for pain-free living. She is the author or co-author of 8 books, including The Path of Energy. So now what is she doing dealing with orbs? Well, we're going to find out about that too. So let's get them in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Colin and Synthia Andrews.
Thank you, Eldon. It's great to be with you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Indeed, our pleasure. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, but in order to proceed without, speaking over one another, if it's okay, I'll generally try to ask you questions directed at each of you individually, but please don't let that stop you from feeding each other as is natural. So, to begin with, around here we like to know 3 things. What is the message? Who is the messenger, and how do we use the information? So if we may, let's start with you, Colin. Tell us, what is your background, and how did you get involved with this work?
Well, my background is that I'm an electrical engineer by profession. I've spent all of my life up until things changed with regard to these subjects, right back in 1983. But I was a senior official in regional government in Great Britain, and when things, basically dropped off the line as far as my profession was concerned, I became involved in, first of all, the crop circle subject, which I just happened to see a set of 5 of these circles in a wheat field in 1983. It was just a regular day on my way to a meeting, and that really changed everything for me. My government work, my profession, slowly but surely got curtailed and dropped away out of sight. And here I am today with certainly with a message I've learned in the last 30 years of research, being basically one subject hand passing me like a baton to another, onto another, from UFOs to consciousness. And, slowly but surely the information came together to write this particular book. So, I have a message which I think will come out in our program. That's who I am. I advised the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's cabinet on this subject, and also the head of state, the Queen Elizabeth, also. So that basically, in a nutshell, is me, Eldon.
Okay, Colin. So we've got some pretty impeccable credentials there. I'd like to sit with the Queen or Margaret Thatcher. Synthia, how did you get involved in crop circles, orbs, UFOs, and the like? And were you ever skeptical of this sort of thing?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes, I was skeptical of these things, but I started my own research into subtle energy and emotions when I was 12 years old, and had parents who were very, very awakened to this type of thing. My father was a medical doctor, and my mother was a professional woman, and both of them were taken with crop circles. And so my mother actually dragged me to a crop circle convention where I met Colin, and we recognized each other. And have been working together ever since. And so really my work into subtle energy and emotions and his work into alternative phenomenon kind of came together beautifully, because what I do explains the experiences people have and helps people to relate to what's happening in their body when they undergo these, types of experiences. And, really, for me, the message in all of this is that right now we're at a time in history where things are changing at such a rapid rate, people can't keep up. And the old ways of doing things, our old ways of thinking and solving problems don't work for the situation we're in right now. So we are forced in this bottleneck situation to access different parts of ourself. And it's an awakening. And I think, more important than anything else right now is to understand how that impacts you on a very physiologic and emotional level, and then to be able to step forward and be your best self in the changes underway.
And I definitely want to go there, but you touched on something I have to ask, because I was visiting England over 20 years ago, and I don't know, about 25 now, lecturing at Imperial College, and this young lady walked in, and we recognized each other too. I want to know how you're using that terminology. You recognized each other.
Well, yeah, it is an interesting way of looking at it, but when he was talking up there, and I started to have experiences in the audience, and I needed to talk to him about those experiences. I was kind of bilocating, actually, I've never had that kind of thing happen before. So I went out into the hallway to talk to him, and there were about 60 people just pressing him against the wall, shooting questions at him. And for some reason, I still, to this day, don't understand. I walked around all those people and went to stand alongside of him against this wall and just face them and kind of help him manage all this energy coming at him. And at the end of it, when he turned to look at me, we looked at each other, and it was as if there were no barriers. We knew each other completely, and we knew our future together, and it was just immediate.
Cool.
If I'd maybe, sorry, Eldon, just to add to that, because I'm the other half, you see.
Yeah, please, Colin.
Of that equation. The experience for me was as Synthia has described it, but there was another piece which was very profound, and one of these synchronistic kind of experiences that kind of followed me from that point on. I was back in England before I'd actually kind of headed out on that particular trip where I met Synthia. I had sent a number of aerial photographs during our surveillance flights for these crop markings. We were running regular flights in southern England around Stonehenge looking for them. And, some of the more intricate patterns that were evolving at that time, this is late 80s into the early 90s, I had high-quality aerial photographs and dispatched them to a person who offered to attempt for me to locate one of two people that held knowledge of the Hopi prophecy. And that was the reasoning for that, was that I had felt, it was basically coming from inside of me without any real particular evidence at that time, that the native peoples might have something to say about these patterns. At that time, it was a complete mystery to us in every sense. And so I was looking for one of two people in the United States that I was told had this knowledge of the prophecy. Well, I headed out to Australia, around the back of the planet to the west coast of the U.S., and went across the center of the country and did several presentations, arriving near New Haven University in Connecticut, where I met Synthia. And as she was saying, I was backed up to the wall after the presentation. I know you have these kind of experiences too, where people want to ask questions that they perhaps not have the courage to ask, during the presentation. And there was Synthia, my eyes locked. That was the first thing that happened. It was as if, these eyes mean something, this person means something. Yeah. And virtually the first words out of her mouth was that, I think you'd like to meet a friend of mine. I think this, maybe you've got some things to talk about. And this person was indeed one of the two people I was looking for. And there was this thump, literally, I've never been able to explain it, nobody can, I don't think. There was a physical thump inside of my head, like somebody had hit me on the head with a hammer at that moment. And that's how we came together.
I've been there, done that. We'll talk about it after the break, but we've got a hard break here. So we're speaking with Colin and Synthia Andrews about their work and book, On the Edge of Reality. It's a great book. I want you to read it. Do stay tuned. You don't want to miss what's coming up after a few words from some of our friends.
Do you feel like you've become lost in a funhouse? Only seeing the reflection of yourself, past, future, and present, but unable to find the real you? I invite you to step through the doorway and onto the path leading to understanding of your mind, your choices, and the influences that surround you. Read Eldon Taylor's New York Times best-selling book, Choices and Illusions, now expanded, updated, and revised. It will provide you with real-life examples of how you can break free from your current perceptions and begin your journey to how high is up. Get your copy today from all bookstores or online from Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble.
Close your eyes. Imagine your goals and dreams. What's preventing you from accomplishing them? Most often, we are our own worst enemies. I can't. I'm not good enough. It's time to reprogram that inner dialogue. Replace all those negative self-images with, I'm good. I am powerful. I can do anything. Eldon Taylor's Inner Talk patented subliminal technology does just that. Researched at numerous universities such as Stanford and by governments such as Mexico and Germany, Inner Talk has repeatedly been proven effective at changing your self-talk. Stop imagining your goals and make them a reality today. Visit www.innertalk.com. That's INNERTALK.com. Innertalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor. Now, back to the show.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, we're speaking with Colin Andrews and Synthia Andrews about their book, On the Edge of Reality. But before we get back to the show, I do want to invite you to join me on Facebook as a friend or a fan. I post regularly everything from where I am and what's on next to the latest in science, technology, and consciousness studies. And from time to time, some of my own opinions about the world we live in. All right, before the break, Colin, you had that thump, that you knew this was the one feeling. And as I said, you know, I've been there, done that. It happened almost like that to me. My wife is sitting across from me now with a big grin on her face. I think that's just, that's a marvelous story. And it also speaks, I think, to some of the things that we're going to be talking about as we go along here, particularly those relative to states of consciousness. Yeah. But we have a lot to talk about, and especially I want to talk about crop circles. But first, let me ask you about some other matters that you've investigated, both of you, I think, but you've written about them in your book. Yeah, I have done some work myself here, and I do think this is a very controversial issue. I want some bottom line. Tell me about chemtrails. Are they real? Are we really dropping stuff in the atmosphere? And if so, why?
Well, I've had grave suspicions myself that this was no more than a misinterpretation of a normal phenomena of normal contrails following aircraft, and that is indeed the view that I held up until probably 2-3 years ago. What changed it for me, Eldon, was that I was open to the information that was being sent a lot, much like probably yourself, people that were concerned about it. And, of course, as the Internet came into full throb, as it were, those that were pushing out concerns and so-called evidence of chemtrails, more and more people became concerned. So that was kind of the background, but I was looking for data and looking, as you're saying, the hard bottom line myself. Well, I have a medical doctor friend who I hold in great regard, a very intelligent man, processes information well. We spend a lot of time with one another, and he has been looking at this and concerned about it for quite some time. It would, at times call me and ask me to look out the window at what's going on over my head right now, because he lives a few miles to the south. And, things very definitely changed when I was sat outside of our barn. We live on a small farm here in Connecticut, with the flight paths out of JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia, New York airports, running over our heads pretty well, one or two to the north and a few to the south, some directly over the top, and aircraft are a very regular sight. And evenings, sometimes I'll grab a coffee and sit out in the barn, enjoy the birds singing, etc. Sure. And here come the aircraft, normal contrail, nothing I can see abnormal. Then there were 3 different aircraft. And this was in the same weather conditions. The other normal aircraft out of the New York airports were leaving contrails that were evaporating back into the atmosphere at the forward rate of the aircraft itself, and that's a normal situation. These other 3 aircraft had a solid, voluminous output. They did not dissipate. They remained there from horizon to horizon, or the aircraft disappeared to the north. They were still visible to beyond the horizon. And this material, 3 lines, in separate lines, separated on the horizontal by, I would imagine, several thousands of feet. It's very hard to tell, but looking to be at about the same height of the regular aircraft, but these 3 were behaving very differently. There was a different material. They were behaving differently in the sense that lateral wind shear was spreading this material thinly across as a veil. Eventually, that's how they finished up. Other aircraft that were going through this material were dragging the material into the vortex behind the aircraft that they were flying. Those were regular aircraft. Well, I left immediately. I grabbed a camera. I got photographs. One of them is in the book. I grabbed my camera. I took the photographs. I got it in here on the internet. I looked up and spoke to a few sources that I've got. I went on to the radar track for the last 15, 20 minutes and saw the regular aircraft that I had seen and their call signs, where they were going to and from. But the 3 aircraft that were different had their information removed from the radar traces. So their transponders were literally taken out by somebody off the system. And so that began for me a really serious investigation in parallel with other things I was looking at. And led me to, in detail it's in the book, but led me to whistleblowers that are inside the system, this program of, it would seem, undeclared to the public, secret operation, but an attempt to increase the reflectivity of the upper atmosphere to reduce, it would seem, global warming. That is the best information that I'm able to get, still not declared to the public. And the material, it has been measured in a number of places. Other friends that are involved in that, with aluminum particles, very fine particles, harmful materials to health, that are now showing up. Although in recent months, for other reasons I of course am not privy to, there has been a drastic reduction in the reports of chemtrails from the usual places. So that's my take on it. Very much a non-believer. Now, I very definitely believe there is something going on there.
Yeah, and if I could break in for just a moment, I think it's very interesting that in February of 2010, at the American Association for the Advancement of Science Symposium, different scientists came forward and proposed a program to dump 10 to 20 megatons of aluminum substances into the atmosphere for the purpose of reflecting sunlight back into space. And it just seems to me that it was very much too close to what's actually being said is happening to be a coincidence.
I think you're absolutely right, Synthia. I was going to bring that up myself. I indeed had the opportunity to, I was told by a former military, a member of the Air Force, about how they loaded this material on planes. Now, what was in the material, she wasn't able to say for sure, but they loaded it on the planes, and of course the planes came back without it. So I think there isn't a question about whether or not they're putting it into the air. The aluminum, however, is very alarming, and as you both bring out in your book, there are a lot of health issues attached to that. What do you do, Colin, when you come across this kind of information? What is the public to do with it, and what is the recourse? I mean, let's assume that we just we were able to, without a doubt, validate, or through the Freedom of Information Act, obtain material, or a whistleblower would stand up and testify before a House subcommittee. What is it that we as citizens can do about these things?
I think it's a very good question, of course. I think the very best that we can do is to pressurize, those voted the representatives that we put in positions of power on our behalf. I think that's all we can literally do, is to be much more proactive, is to get involved, use the internet, get on to these people. I think all of us are looking at this crossroads that we are now on, that Synthia was referring to, and yourself. I think what we're all doing is looking for a change of attitude and mind. Look for transparency and honesty, and each of these subjects. Although we're talking about chemtrails right now, there are many others that are programs that are secret to one level or another.
And we're going to go to some of those too.
Oh, right. Well, what I think what it does, it pieces together an overall feeling, an overall sense that rather than it's us on the same page at a difficult time for humanity, is that it's us and them. It's us not knowing what they are doing. And I think it's not going. I don't think it is going to change, or has the ability to change overnight. But slowly but surely, with the pressure and changes in this, the paradigm shift, the paradigm movement, is as it takes place, congeals a little more power to our hands. And so I think we can only hope that the concerns that we have, and those concerns that we voice, and hopefully not with the evidence that we have a failing society due to some of these technologies. Let's hope that we can change where we're going before all of that might well fall into place. Playing God with genetic engineering and so on, it just goes on and on and on. The military often getting hold of technology before we can utilize it for our good. We're fighting wars with it. And so, the subject is very wide, and this crossroads that we're on is multifaceted. But yes, I think the voice that we have through the internet, and knowing who our friends are and who you can count on to support this constant thrust in a better direction, is hopefully our best shot.
Let me send something by both of you, okay? Because I totally concur. I think we have to be proactive today. I mean, I don't believe that we can just sit back any longer and depend on somebody else to start a petition, to talk to the neighbor, to make some noise, to investigate, to check out the channels. That's kind of where I am. But
yeah,
there is a lot of parlance in the new age environment, particularly that, if you tune into this thing, you're kind of creating it. You really don't want to pay attention to that stuff. It's, the mind can create all these things. And so there is this division of ideas about consciousness in it, where part of us, I'm saying, I think we need to be activists, we need to be informed, we need to be doing something. I think that's our responsibility. But there are those that are saying, no, you don't even want to pay any attention to that. You give it power when you do. That's the. What do you say, both of you?
Yeah, I'll start that out, Eldon. It's very interesting. We received a lot of criticism when we were putting this book together from different people about the idea that we wanted to put some of these hidden technologies in a book about the paranormal and about the evolution of consciousness. But in our opinion, you really can't change what you don't know about, and it's the lack of information is the biggest issue that we're at. I am probably in the New Ager camp in terms of the types of things I research and work with. However, in my experience, people like Lynn McTaggart and she's just one of many different scientists who are working with the power of intention and intentional experiments for creating peace, for actually influencing molecules. And if we're at the point of thinking that consciousness is a force that we can interact with and direct, then this is key information for us to be working with, and maybe chemtrails is a place to start with it.
Yeah, I agree, and I would add to that the intuition that each of us has, perhaps some more than others, it's there for a reason, and if the basic, sincere thrust of who we are is to seek out truth, then whether or not it's in the New Age camp or outside of it, whether the subject matter that we're looking at is real or not real, or should be looked at or shouldn't be tackled, it is the truth that we're looking for in all of it. And the example I would give is actually, it's not a part of my path that I've trodden has been 10 to 15 years, which was great, very, very difficult for me, because for the very reason that you stated there, I was looking at that point at the crop circle phenomenon, and had announced on BBC television that during the year 2000, after a 2-year period of intensive investigation of those crop markings made by people, I announced to a world made up of many people that believed all of them were real, and a hardcore of, I'm just going to use the term believer, that's abused at times, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but people that believed that they were all were all real, tended to be the people that had an industry of some sort running on that belief system, and you might say had a religion in the making. Well, had I gone along with the advice of do not touch that, do not listen to Colin Andrews, do not listen to what he's saying, that 80% at that time were made by people, I would have missed the golden nuggets of what actually is going on inside of that mystery. And so, it was only by the fact that I didn't like the arrows that were being shot at me, the hate mail that I was getting, etc., that I knew my truth. I knew the information that I was that I had gained through a hard investigation was what the public needed to know. And having kind of traversed that particular experience meant a lot to me, because I can see that when you start to tread water in difficult ground, as long as you know who you are and why you are seeking that information, whether it is ego-driven or whether you're looking for more hope and for a better world for my children, it really comes down to who you are, I think, as to how you react to these different situations.
Well, I'm going to come back and say I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be informed. I happen to subscribe to that theory that what makes the human condition different from the rest of the animal kingdom is our intelligence. And as Clifton Fadiman said, either God gave us intelligence as a plague, or the ability to think as a gift. Given that, we simply need to be informed so that we can participate in this world in ways that improve the world, in ways that seek the peace that we're all after. That's my 2 bits. Listen, I'm going to pass this one, let you decide who gives me the answer, but my wife and I have taken a lot of photographs of orbs. But, every time it really has turned out to be, light or a water drop caught on the camera lens. I mean, tell me this. Are orbs real? And if so, what are they trying to communicate?
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right, well, I'm a photographer myself, Eldon, so I'm very interested in this, and having obviously also spent many years looking at the UFO subject, there's a reason why I would need to know a lot about them. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that many of those that I've taken myself, and know that you have, and that we are sent by people that have an interest in this, are water droplets. I mean, we've many experiments on this. Water droplets, dust particles, foreign matter of one sort or another, a high humidity atmosphere. Often, and more often than not, when the camera is placed on the automatic and calls for light, it activates the flash system, and whether a 35 millimeter or a digital, although digital does tend to, I think, produce more of these, you have your orb. And so we can explain, I think, most of them in that way, but certainly not all of them. And I would subscribe to the fact that some of them are real, and I could show evidence of that. We talk about it in the book, and we've on the website, people can see movies of these. They really fall into two camps. One are the orbs that appear on our 35 millimeters in the past, and the digital cameras of the current day. Now, here's just one example of how we know this to be so. Back a few years, this again is an example that I was involved in myself, making a presentation in Chicago at the International MUFON Conference. 3 individuals, 3 different cameras within a few seconds of one another, one with the time period stamped on the photograph, took photographs of me up on the podium, and with an orb over the top of my head. And don't, none of the listeners should think that I'm painting a picture of some special Colin Andrews here. I'm just simply talking about orbs. And these orbs in these 3 photographs were in the same place over the top of my head. Now, that's very hard to believe that 3 cameras would pick up on a single piece of dust in a different orientation. They were in different places in the room, and yet the same orb was over the top of my head in those 3 photographs. It's just one example of many that we've been able to say, well, that orb is certainly not dust, water, or dust particles. But that's the still photography. Then you have the movies where we have orbs again, and there are 3 or 4 extremely convincing videos that have been, analyzed by photographic experts. The military have had a look at them, for me from some years ago. And these are orbs about 18 inches in diameter that are moving intelligently, and I think there's that word that is important, that these orbs know where they are. They are appearing to certainly be aware of the topography in the environment, moving with regard to the crop markings from one to another, looking down at tractor tire marks that have traversed the fields in the sowing and harvesting system in Europe. The tractor tire marks where they sow the seed and then they use the same tire marks across the field to put all the chemicals on that we then finish up eating. These orbs are dropping down into those tire marks as if they want to know more about those tire marks also. And so I could go on, but they are real. I have no doubt whatsoever they are real. They're on the films. They're on the movies. They move intelligently. And one category of orb I do believe we need to classify as the UFO in the classical sense, that this is an intelligently controlled object of some sort. Unidentified.
All right, and I don't want to come back to that, but now, Synthia, this one, still on orbs, this one's really in my mind for you, because there are so many people that have spoken to me very sincerely about orbs, that they feel that they're communicating with them, and yet, when I look at it, every single one of them are females. It's as though they're more inclined to be empathically connected or something. You've witnessed orbs. Do they communicate with you?
Well, that goes right back to the idea of what are they, and I'm going to throw this in and add it to Colin's story about the 3 photographs, because there was a person that was supposed to be in that lecture hall who didn't join the lecture. He was asleep up in his room, and he came downstairs afterwards before we even knew we had these orbs on, and he said, "Don't worry, I didn't miss your lecture. I came down in my astral body and I watched what was going on," and we were laughing, kind of laughing at it. Mm-hmm. But then later, when those pictures came through, we thought, well, I don't know, why not? And then I got to thinking about Walt Disney, who was actually a pretty esoteric guy, and in his early cartoons, you would see ghosts suddenly becoming balls of light and traveling around the room and then unfolding into a form again. And so I started to think about these as vehicles of consciousness, and I started to notice that a lot of the photographs that come in that are unexplained are around the bellies of pregnant women or are in the rooms where people are dying. And so I think that there is a possibility that these are vehicles for consciousness, and so therefore, yes, why wouldn't they be able to communicate to us if we are open and if we can receive those messages?
I think there's another piece, Eldon, that if I may just add to what Synthia has said, I'm actually very pleased that she remembered to raise the piece about the orbs in Chicago. I'll take the responsibility of putting a name out here because I know the person well, and I think he would be certainly okay with it. And I say this, and I name it very deliberately for a good reason. This is a well-known person, Dr. Stephen Greer.
Stephen, who's been on the show.
Yes, I thought he had. Well, Stephen, like us all who have gone public, have our detractors and our supporters, and I just need to say that I have certainly witnessed with Stephen Greer in England and in other parts of the world experiences which are of a high strangeness kind. And I'm going to keep with the more positive side of what has happened around Stephen Greer here. He is the person who made that statement, and this is why I've brought this up and named him, because I was also with him in southern England, actually several times, but on this particular occasion, this was a misty night. We were in a place that's very familiar to people that are looking at these crop circles close to Stonehenge, and we were out there basically just hoping to see something. We didn't know what. We were there looking for something. It was nighttime, it was cloudy, and I think we'd pretty well given up hope of seeing anything. Well, he went through this vectoring process that he has, and it is fairly well known about now, and suddenly an orb at very high speed came through the low cloud. It was actually just inside of the cloud. It was like lighting up like a light inside of cotton wool. And so it was illuminating the very low side of the cloud, under the base of the cloud, and it shot through that sky like nothing I've ever seen. This was an orb. Again, now this is the same man that says he's projecting himself to watch or be aware of what I'm raising at the conference. So there may be some tendrils here that connect the person with the phenomenon. I don't know, but I raised that for what it's worth. We're looking at orbs, and one was on the photograph, and the other physically seen. But there were about 60 of us with him that night, and witnessed that. This orb broke into two directly over our heads. An extraordinary situation.
Really interesting. So now the two that broke. Let me just ask you this. I mean, when you implied earlier that the orbs, for all intent and purposes, were UFOs. So what is it? Like they're drones, alien drones?
Well, we really have no idea. I mean, I've been privileged to be, very much involved in the UFO research, government and non-government. I would attend meetings with the Ministry of Defence in Great Britain I'm not saying a regular basis, but not infrequently for several years on this subject. And I've certainly come in possession of material that I've been given and have witnessed myself. Again, some of these are in the book, that declare the hand of absolute direct interaction. I mean, I just give you one very quickly that was exactly that. This was going back to, 1991. Within several hundreds of yards of the Stephen Greer experience that I was talking about then, I was in the Japanese television. Yeah, very, very quickly. With NTV, saw a light in the sky, interacted with their flashes of light, flash 1, 2, 3, and the object is flashing back 1, 2, 3. Confirmed through my sources on radar directly that night as not being aircraft of any kind. There was nothing in the area. So we're looking at intelligence interacting with humanity.
That's an incredible story. Tell me, HAARP. What's your take on HAARP, Colin?
Well, the reason, I think it's just worth starting, Eldon, by giving a reason why we put any of the technological questions in the book at all. And the reason was that we felt that some of these significant technologies and secret projects that are underway, we don't know what the ramifications of them are. It's much like, the levels of CO2 that we've been applying to the atmosphere would seem in part anyway, resulted in global warming. it's like, you lift a stone and out come insects you've perhaps never seen before. It's when you're challenging Mother Nature, you're challenging nature's systems, one can anticipate ramifications and perhaps even new phenomena. And we felt that was important to say, because there are a number of very new, unexplained, supernatural kind of things that are occurring around our planet now. And so when it came to HAARP, this came in as part and parcel of something that I discovered, basically just kind of came across it as a result of an email that I received from one of the visitors to my website from Australia back 3 years ago, sending me photographs of an unusual radar pattern on the bomb site, the Bureau of Meteorology, the Australian government meteorological site, which is shown across the country, as its weather system. And this was a large white ring across southwest Australia. Well, I took it and noted it, recorded it, and then came other reports across Australia. I started to delve a little bit. This is one of my subjects, and meteorology. Made inquiries at meteorological offices here and there, and was given most of them were saying, this is kind of incomplete radar data that gives you this kind of dropout. It's nothing unusual. Well, it certainly became unusual as I began to record a variety of patterns not seen before. And I was then getting information coming from the technical guys who were working for BOM, asking me not to declare their names in the system. They wanted to keep their jobs. But this was nothing to do with the sensitivity levels on the radar. This was nothing they'd seen before, and it was national. Well, I could see it was national. I was getting the information from across the entire continent. And as I was logging it, I began to see that there was a pattern to this, a pattern of the patterns, and that when these patterns appeared in a certain sequence, there were then physical meteorological changes, weather changes. This was acknowledged by the Met Office, the BOM in Australia, by putting up on their screen, and it's still there to this day, seen on television screens and the internet around the world, that these are interferences they are still trying to resolve. Well, it has since also been acknowledged in Queensland that the government are involved in weather modification work, which has been funded by the Australian government. And so it led me, with other much more qualified experts in this field than myself, to look at HAARP, because we were looking at interference patterns probably coming from above rather than the lateral horizontal plane. It was interfering with these signals in the radar returns, which were abnormal. It was abnormal in the sense that they'd not been seen before on any continent, let alone Australia. And so we were looking at HAARP. There is a HAARP facility in the northern part of the outback of Australia. And the really question I don't have an answer for is whether HAARP is, in fact, playing a part by focusing its beamed high-frequency system into the regions of the weather modifications systems that have been deployed to try and improve the precipitation in a 1,000-year drought area. And let me just to conclude that in the sequence that I discovered, indeed there was the reversal of a 1,000-year drought within about 48 hours into a 100-year flood in Melbourne and Sydney, where they had not seen anything like this. And so there was a very, very serious questions have been raised whether HAARP is part, and I don't have the answer for it, but what I do know is that the radar patterns and weather modification have got correlations in events that are happening in Australia. So you probably know more about HAARP than I do, Eldon. That's not anything I'm an expert on, but there's a lot of, as you say, there are a lot of questions raised about the project and whether it is still online. My data has gone dead. So as far as I can see, it is offline, but I don't know whether that is, in fact, whether they've changed frequencies or what they're doing there.
I know that we are all causal, oriented creatures. We see a pair of scissors snip a stem and an apple falls, and well, it was the scissors that caused the apple to fall. We don't sometimes, I mean, we don't look behind and think, no, it wasn't the scissors or something else called gravity that really caused it to fall.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, I think you've got a smoking gun here, personally. I think the causal connectedness really pushes what we mean by coincidence. I don't think probability-wise, coincidence doesn't work for me. That's all there is to it. So, at any rate, moving right along, sir, we have been avoiding the real issue. You gave name to crop circles. And, of course, UFOs and crop circles, they've been controversial for as long as I've been around. My question. There are hoaxes in the world. And then there are those that I guess are real. How do you know one from another?
It's a good question, and that was the central question for the first 15 of the last 30 years. It has been exactly that. The first thing, as you know, engineers and scientists do is gather the data, and we were literally location looking for measurements, magnetic alignments, plant analysis, electromagnetic fields, and so on. Physical features, I employed for a period of time ex-retired police officers, police detectives who would be looking for physical evidence associated with people, and on and on and on. So in the year 2000, when I made that announcement that I was referring to earlier, that the funded operation of 2 years, 1999-2000, funded by Lawrence Rockefeller in New York, looking very specifically at the man-made, the figure transpired that 80% at that time that had appeared in England were made by people. Well, so which left us 20% we had to look very closely at, because we couldn't prove that they were made by people at all. There was a lot of information that we were able to ascertain related to that 20% that came, helped me answer your question now. And so this is how it panned out. In that 20% at that time, and, I need to refer to that time and not now because things have changed. But in the year 2000, we had 20% where these were the more simple designs. That sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, that they've been banking on the fact that the high complexity and size were impossible to be made by people, when in fact the actual data on the ground was they were more likely to be made by people, and we had evidence that most were. It did not include all of them, and that's worth saying. What was left in that 20% were the more simple designs, single circles, found by a farmer here, there, and everywhere around the planet. 2 circles next to one another, 3 in a straight line, 5 forming a cross, the Celtic cross with a single ring, a double ring. And so it was like the water droplet freezing into a snowflake. The complexity began to evolve, still within that 20% of being real, where there were no tracks in, no tracks out, no powdering of the soil structure underneath the feet that would have been needed to have stood there to have made them, where we had magnetic anomalies up to 300% above the Earth's magnetic field, the 5 goals in the Northern Hemisphere, in that part of the Northern Hemisphere, plant anomalies that I cannot speak to because I'm not the biologist, although there are biologists who have looked at it and have said, I have some problem with some of this, but I'm just giving it to you as it has been given to me, is that there are plant anomalies here that's changed at the cellular level. So this is the real versus the man-made, where there are tracks in and out, there is soil compression, there is no magnetic anomaly, and there is plant damage. These are made by people.
Okay, well now, just a straightforward question, because there is there is information out there on the internet, and my researchers turned up a YouTube video. Have you ever been hoaxed yourself? Have you ever, misidentified a crop circle?
Yes, I have. They were in a kind of stressful environment, and I'll try and keep this very concise. I coordinated Operation Blackbird, which was a surveillance operation with the British Army, BBC Television, Nippon Television, Japan, who co-funded this operation in the year 1990. And during what it was supposed to be initially a kind of a very secret operation, and the television companies were going to make their money on transmitting programs later to keep basically the public away from the site when this was going on. Lots of surveillance equipment in position. Well, it's a long story, but I'm keeping it very, very concise. I was called to the site early hours in the morning, where I was told there was a fairly elaborate, not anything like we see these days, but a fairly elaborate design had appeared in front of the cameras, and a strange light had been seen entering the field from above. Long story short is that Pat Delgado, my co-author at that time and co-researcher, colleague, who had just left his NASA job, he and I went into that field with Nippon television cameras outside filming us, and we went out on television and stated that in the first few moments of inspection, we felt we had a major event. It was quickly revealed we were foolish in the sense that we didn't wait for analysis, proper inspection, aerial surveillance. We had none of that to work with. I guess I felt feeling under the pressure of many television cameras that were gathering there, and the fact that it was going out live over the television systems around the world being beamed out by satellite. I guess we just succumbed to the situation and the pressure. We were being told to make this, put the announcement out because it was going out live on breakfast time television in Great Britain and being beamed around Good Morning America, etc. 5 hours later. So yes, we were fooled. We announced that was real when in fact it was not. Well, that's really what you're looking for there, Al.
No,
it's not a perfect. We weren't perfect, and we got it wrong.
You know what happens, Colin. You have people out there in the world that if you make one misstep, you make one mistake, you say something isn't quite right, then they look to discredit all of your work on the basis of that. And, everyone and I've interviewed a number of people, popular TV people, medium, scientists, people like yourself who make mistakes.
Yeah.
But it takes integrity to say, I messed this one up, and this is why, and that was a mistake. And on the other hand, when you ask somebody, what about, and they go sideways on you, and they start blaming it on anyone and everyone except them, well, then you know that maybe you shouldn't be giving them any real credibility. We all make mistakes, and I want our listening audience to understand that we do our homework, and if we bring somebody onto the show and I think they're full of nonsense, I tell them so, and I tell them so right here on the air. And if there is something in the background that they should be aware of, I try to get that out. So, no, your answer, I think, is fully satisfactory as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, listen, for both of you, we, you're scientists. You didn't come in. You didn't graduate with any degrees in orbs or crop circles or UFOs. So it's one thing to detail your observations. That's what a scientist does. And it's another thing to imbue it with intention. But that said, who can give it intention better than the people that are doing the observations? What on earth are these crop circles in your mind all about?
I think what it's all about is we have been presented with a clean sheet. A stage was set in 1976 where the subject didn't exist. And as we were introduced to the subject, individuals of all kinds of researchers, all kinds of disciplines and belief systems, all slowly coming on board. As this whole thing grew, integrity became, of course, and it always does, vitally important to where it was to evolve and where it was to go, where it was to head. We had, and I was privileged to be in pretty well from the beginning in 1983. Hence the term crop circles, which I coined. What we also witnessed was every element came to the forefront here. We had the intelligence agencies coming in because of the public's interest, and all of that being experienced. What I think this is about, and I hope that the book kind of spells this out in some detail towards the end, is that we have here a showcase of how humanity operates. It operates in the same way inside this subject as it does in all subjects, as it does in all religions and in all politics. And what you have, I am fairly sure, this is a mirror placed in front of us now, and in the elements that were inside the subject are, for example, people who will say, as we touched upon this earlier, don't believe this camp because they are all real. What these guys are doing in telling you that they're hoaxes, or even any percentage of them are hoaxes, is they're damaging, the spiritual intelligence behind the subject. And then you have people that are making crop circles themselves, who are not being given a voice, but hold vital clues, because these people are having the same paranormal experiences, manufacturing crop circles that I have had and people like me have had in researching them. Farmers have had these experiences, but until we're all talking to one another on this piece of paper, in this stage that was set, we don't get the powerful message that is here for us. And the message is that, we really have to come together. We have to find our truth. We have to know who we want to be to evolve and take advantage of the process of consciousness. And I think that really and truly is what's happening here.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, because I think this is an important piece of it.
I'm going to ask you, Synthia, to hold that one and add it when we come back from the break, or the computer's going to kick us out, and suddenly we'll be talking to space. All right? When we come back, Synthia Andrews will add to her interpretation of why we have orbs in the first place. We hope you are enjoying, not orbs, I mean crop circles. Well, orbs too. We hope you are enjoying our show today with Colin and Synthia Andrews. You can visit their website to learn more about their book and work. Go to colinandrews.net. That's COLINANDREWS.net. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes and take your calls, so do stay tuned.